Pilots, flight attendants, and frequent passengers, what are the creepiest and most mysterious things that have happened to you in the air? I was flying to Australia on a Fly Emirates flight during the Iraq War. At that time, planes still flew over Iraq. It was night and all the passengers were asleep, but I decided to look out the window. I saw a vast plain and a long mountain range stretching from left to right, illuminated by a bright moon. Along its entire length, powerful explosions were happening. They probably spanned tens of kilometers and occurred at different altitudes. The explosions continued the entire time we flew past them. Someone probably had a very bad night, as the Allied forces were likely trying to destroy everything in those mountains. During a piloting lesson at 1,000 meters, I saw an empty cardboard box falling to the ground. I thought I was hallucinating, but my instructor also saw it. Another strange flight story. I was sitting next to a man and his mentally disabled son. The son, around 16 years old, kept touching me and calling me mommy. I was about 11 years old at the time. I felt really uncomfortable, and the father kept apologizing but did nothing about it. If something like this happened today, I'd react differently, but back then I didn't know what to do. I just wanted the flight attendant to notice what was happening and move me to another seat. We were in the air for about 20 to 30 minutes when suddenly the whole plane shut down. Everything went dark and the flight attendant with the drinks cart crashed into the ceiling. I felt my seat lift off the ground. Luckily, I was strapped in and oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. This all probably lasted 3 to 4 seconds, but it felt like 10 minutes. Then everything went back to normal. We had to make an emergency landing at a small airport. I still don't understand what happened. The pilot addressed us over the intercom just once, saying that we were making an emergency landing, and from the way he said it, I started to panic and began praying. You could hear that the pilot was scared. We landed safely with no further issues, and at the small airport there was a restaurant. Some guy from business class bought drinks for all of us. It was 9 a.m. and I think everyone got drunk that morning. One of the flight attendants quit on the spot and joined us for a drink. They didn't explain what had happened, they just said we would be split across different flights. Many people ended up going to their next flight by car. I, for one, had to drink heavily to calm down. Another strange experience on a flight. This happened a year or two after September 11th. I was flying to Germany in business class across the ocean. I was sleeping when suddenly I woke up to an announcement asking if there were any military or police personnel on board. I looked to my right and saw 2 men beating up another guy lying on the floor. They didn't know how to use plastic handcuffs, just regular zip ties. It turned out this guy had gotten drunk, flipped out, and tried to rush the cockpit. This happened after September 11th, and for the next 2 hours of the flight, the guy lay on the floor of my row. When we landed, very scary German police officers came for him. Another experience. I was flying from the UK to Australia and was passing over Germany when an automated announcement came over the intercom, "Please prepare for a water landing." For a few minutes, everyone was in panic until the announcement was corrected, and it turned out that the flight attendant had just pressed the wrong button. I won't lie, I was freaked out. A near collision while landing. I was flying to Arizona late at night. The plane was about to land and the pilot was preparing the gear. We were about 150 meters from the runway when suddenly the nose of the plane shot up and the pilot floored the throttle. All the passengers were stunned. It turned out there was another plane on the runway and we had to make an emergency maneuver to avoid a collision. That was some serious stuff. Turbulence experience. Have you ever flown on a large passenger plane and encountered turbulence? You could feel the wings of the plane bending up to 3 to 4 meters, the overhead compartments opening, and the oxygen masks dropping from the ceiling. This was back when you could meet people at the exit gate. My friend, who had just gotten off the plane, looked as white as a ghost. He took the train home. In 2007, I was on one of the last flights out of Frankfurt before the Kyrill hurricane closed the airport. We had reached a decent altitude when the storm hit. I had a window seat in the last row and I could see the wings of the plane bending back and forth. It felt like we were flying by flapping our wings. I closed the window shade because I didn't want to know if the plane was about to fall and we'd all die. The flight attendants were strapped in, which was a first for me on a Lufthansa flight. At some point, we suddenly dropped 1,500 meters. All unstrapped objects hit the upper part of the plane and then fell. I didn't realize at the time that the flight manager was sitting in the middle of the plane. It was a complete mess. We were in a strong turbulence zone for about 30 minutes, and the last 10 to 15 minutes were just regular turbulence. The rest of the flight was normal. I'd never been that scared on a plane, and I've been under fire in Baghdad. A strange encounter at a bar before a flight. I was flying on a Lufthansa flight from New York to Frankfurt. Before boarding, I decided to stop at a bar near the gate. At the bar, there was a strange-looking man, almost like a mannequin or an android. He was very thin with perfect hair that looked unnatural, and his skin resembled plastic. He sat at the bar with perfect posture and barely moved, only raising his glass to drink. As it turned out, this strange guy was on the same flight as me. Everything went as usual, but as we were taxiing to the runway, the pilot announced that we had to return to the gate. A few minutes later, a group of police officers boarded the plane and dealt with something in business class. About 10 minutes later, I saw the weird guy from the bar getting off the plane with the police. After we took off, I went to the restroom where a couple of flight attendants were chatting. I asked them what had happened, and they told me the strange guy wasn't answering questions from the flight attendants. The pilot also approached him and tried to ask him some questions, but he just stared straight ahead and remained silent. After September 11th, the crew didn't take any chances and called the police. They took the guy off the plane. A bizarre encounter with a strange passenger. About 4 to 5 years ago, I was flying on a business trip. One of the passengers turned out to be a complete nutcase. He asked me to swap seats with him. I had an aisle seat, and he supposedly had a window seat. Not long after, another passenger came up to me and claimed that I was in his seat. It turned out the crazy guy had already changed seats multiple times with other passengers. During the safety demonstration, one of the flight attendants passed by and stood next to the crazy guy. He started moving things off the cart while she was trying to keep her composure. I thought, wow, she has great self-control. I opened the window shade to enjoy the view, and that's when I heard the click of a phone camera. I turned around and saw the guy taking a picture of me. I asked him what he was doing, and he showed me the photo. I immediately told him to delete it. I didn't want to escalate the situation since I was tired and just wanted to get to the hotel. After takeoff, the guy took out a golden mask and put it on. I thought he was joking around with his friend sitting between us, but when I asked the friend about him, it turned out he didn't know him either. I was really curious at that point and tried to talk to him to figure out what he did for a living. He said, I teach people how to live, and now I'm going to teach the pilot how to live. That's when I got seriously freaked out. I thought it could be my last day on Earth. I quickly came up with a plan of action. After he left, I pressed the flight attendant call button and told her what was happening. We had to mention that we didn't know who this guy was. A strict-looking man, presumably a flight marshal, came to talk to him for a while and then sat behind us. Long story short, I never changed seats with anyone again, and I still don't know who that guy was or what he actually wanted. A strange sight over the Atlantic. I'm a pilot, and I've witnessed many strange things in the air. Most of them can be explained logically, but one thing I saw left me completely puzzled and made me think deeply. We were flying east over the Atlantic at about 4 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time when we started noticing lights. They were positioned between 2 and 5 degrees above the horizon and were moving from south to north. Not all of them followed the same path, some moved faster, some slower. The lights would brighten and dim at intervals. We observed them for about 90 minutes, even getting the entire crew to look. Every few minutes, we could see a faint light going from south to north, but at one point, something unexpected happened. One of the lights, the dimmest of 3 moving north, suddenly stopped. The other 2 continued, but this one turned around and started moving south. We weren't the only plane crossing the Atlantic that night. At least 2 other crews with whom we were in contact also saw the light change direction. I'm a skeptic, so I think we just happened to catch this event at the right time. One satellite was moving south to north and another was going the opposite direction. The lights must have crossed paths in the same spot we were looking at, and the first satellite died just as the second one caught the sunlight. It's not that the satellite turned around, it's the fact that 2 satellites crossed paths in the same spot. Maybe the light seemed to stop because of some atmospheric distortion or the sunlight being so low. Either way, for a couple of minutes, we were all stunned by what we saw. Thank you for watching. Feel free to share your similar stories in the comments below, and don't forget to check out our other videos.